classical world, centered in Greece and the Eastern Mediterranean. Here we can find many of the foundations of modern society. From organized religion to the foundations of literature, philosophy, math, and democracy. However, at this time, there is also a small village at the edge of civilization called Rome. This small village, founded in 753 BC, would grow and eventually dominate the entire Italian peninsula, and from there, they would go on to dominate the entire Mediterranean. Rome would shift the center of civilization west, as the Romans usurped the Greeks. Rome would introduce this Mediterranean civilization to Hispania, Gaul, and Britannia, modern-day Spain, Portugal, France, and England. For over 400 years, West Europe would be recognized as the home of the New World Order, while the East was seen as old and stagnant, seeking lost glory of days gone. Rome would be officially divided into a western and eastern half by Emperor Diocletian in what is called the Tetrarchy. This event would cause the western half to be less supported by the East, causing the gradual decline of Western Europe into the Dark Ages. In 330 CE, there was a dramatic shift in Roman society. The emperor was Constantine the Great, and the state religion was changed to Christianity rather than the polytheistic cult of Rome. Constantine moved the capital away from Rome to Byzantium, soon to be renamed Constantinople, in the east. This marked a resurgence of the East, and would become even more so the case as 6th century historian Procopius describes trade with China and India expanding during this time, especially within the eastern parts of the empire. Not to mention the greater trade, the shift back to the east allowed Rome to be closer to their main rival Persia, which had remained an important state in the east since the classical period. Following another period of decline and invasions, the Western Empire would collapse to barbarian invaders in 476 CE, with the Visigoths taking Italy. Many consider this event to be the true start of the Dark Ages, when decades of decline climaxes in the total collapse of the largest institution in the West. Through all of this, the Eastern Empire retains the glory of antiquity. There would be several attempts by Eastern emperors to recapture parts of the West, namely Emperor Justinian and his general Belisarius would recapture large parts of the empire. These attempts were initially successful, but the first case of the Black Death in Europe and the decay that had cemented itself in the Western societies and the Western Empire would relapse into Germanic and Slavic hands. In 610 CE, Muhammad receives his revelation and begins to spread Islam throughout Arabia. Soon, the Islamic caliphates were on the doorstep of both the Eastern Roman and the Sassanid Empire. Then, the over 20-year-long, mutually destructive war between the Romans and the Sassanids in 602 to 628 allowed the Arabs to conquer all of Mesopotamia and Persia from the Sassanids, and the Levant, Egypt, and North Africa from the Romans. These conquests would forever change the Middle East from an extremely contested and diverse area to a relatively homogeneous Islamic and Arab region. As the Islamic conquest expanded across North Africa and Iberia, Western Europe would now be directly facing the threats of the East, whereas so long they'd been protected by the Eastern Romans. At the same time, Charlemagne has expanded his Frankish Empire across France, Germany, and North Italy, and has even been proclaimed Holy Roman Emperor by the Pope as a way to undermine the East's dominance. These events would culminate in the First European Renaissance, or the Carolingian Renaissance, named after Charlemagne. The West would now leave the Dark Ages, and would enter the feudal period and achieve gradual technological and social growth. In response to the Islamic expansion, the Catholic West would embark on a series of crusades to reaffirm the significance of Christianity, especially Catholicism, their variant of Christianity. The Crusades not only helped distract the Islamic world from fighting the Romans, buying the Eastern Empire time, but they also began to allow various Western powers to gradually increase their renown in comparison to the Romans. This trend was only heightened by the various Islamic Turkic groups that migrated into Persia and Anatolia. These Turks would initially be united as the Seljuk Turks, but many groups broke off as they advanced into Anatolia, such as the Sultanate of Rome. These Turkic groups would gradually fight deeper into Anatolia. Eventually, a group known as the Ottomans would expand their influence over the region at the expense of the Romans. Now, the crusading Western states were beginning to eclipse the declining Eastern Empire. Now, the Ottomans were powerful enough that they had marched on the gates of Constantinople under Sultan Mehmed II. Here, the last Roman Empire, Constantine XI Palaeologos, would fight to his death against the Ottomans. The last bastion of Rome would fall to Islam in 1453. Thus marks the end of Roman history. The fall of Constantinople would have great consequences. Because of prosecution by the Islamic Ottomans, many Greco-Roman scholars migrated to Italy. This exodus, along with the gradual trend of technological breakthroughs, led to a renaissance of Roman art and science in the West. This was a true rebirth of the West. In this period, they would restore many of the technologies and social achievements lost during the Middle Ages, and even develop and expand on new technologies. However, the true rebirth of the West depended on Islam not conquering the entire European continent. To this end, Muslims were finally removed from Iberia in the Spanish Reconquista in 1492. At the same time, the king and queen of the now united Spain sponsored Christopher Columbus to sail across the Atlantic, demonstrating that in some ways the West now surpassed the Roman Empire. Now, the Muslims were finally removed from the western part of the continent, but in the east, the Islamic Ottoman Empire was growing more powerful. The Ottomans were expanding throughout the Balkans, making use of the power vacuum that was incurred upon the annexation of the Eastern Roman Empire. Eventually, the Ottomans threatened the city of Vienna, and in 1683, a coalition of Christian European states would engage in a decisive battle against the Ottomans in the Battle of Vienna. The Ottoman loss would mark the end of Ottoman expansion in Europe. Finally, Europe was mostly safe from outside invaders for the first time in its history. Thanks to the explorations of Columbus and Vasco da Gama, the West was now able to make use of their scientific and military gains that they achieved over the course of the Renaissance and the Middle Ages to establish colonies around the world. These colonies would expand, and the West's influence and economic dominance would progress. At last, they were seen as major players on the world stage again. Now, even to this day, the world is dominated by the West. Europe and her American colonies have maintained a significant hegemony over the globe. Our lives are defined by the West, whether you live there or not. But even the West was shaped by forces that acted against it and around it. May 29, 1453, the day the East fell, and the day the West would rise.